Hi, everybody. It's Zane with Sailing Views. How are you doing? Today, I'm going to talk to you about boat work. Now, a lot of people seem to neglect it, but let me tell you, you need to take care of it. You need to do it now. So, with the pandemic going on, a lot of people are spending extra time working on their boat and getting it prepared to go sailing. Um, I've noticed a lot of people are at least bringing their boats to me to get things done. And I'm noticing a lot of the same thing going on with a lot of boats. And it's basically neglect. So here's a few tips to take care of your boat and to kind of fix things up. Now, with that said, let's start on the bow of the boat and work our way back. I'm going to primarily do this for Melges 24s because that's the boat I sail on, and that's the boat I seem to be working on a lot. All right, so on the bow of the Melges, basically you start with the spinnaker pole. The pole sticks out the front. Um, I've noticed on the last couple boats that the bow eyes or the spinnaker pole eye and the block are either cracking or the bolts are about to break. So go ahead and check those, get it taken care of. Uh, Make sure you have a good lube on your pole so it goes in and out. The rubber gasket where the pole goes into the deck, do a double check on that. Make sure it's good because those fail without you even noticing. Um, let's move back to the inside of the boat on the pole. Do a double check on the little shiv that's in there. That thing goes bad every now and then, and you don't really know it. You don't really check it. Also, check the hole where the line goes through because I've noticed on a couple boats that they start to crack and they start to split. You might need to, put a little glass or carbon on that and just kind of beef it up some so it doesn't break at the wrong moment. Um, Now let's move back to stanchions. Lifelines and stanchions, those are something that a Melges 24 and I'm sure a lot of other boats have problems with. When I say problems, I don't mean they're breaking or falling apart, but they do flex a good bit. So when they're flexing, what I like to do is, you can get the knee braces from Melges and stick in there. That definitely helps. But what I've found seems to help even better is kind of an easy fix. Uh, the base of it's only a couple inches around. So what I do is I cut out an area of the deck right there, and I fill it with solid fiberglass. Because what happens is right where that stanchion is, there's a foam core, and in other boats, it's either foam or balsa or sometimes plywood. Either way, that area gets wet and it gets soft and it gets soggy, and it seems to kind of disconnect from the rest of the boat. And I don't mean like delamination. I mean the load there, it's only point loaded in that one area, and it doesn't really spread. And there's no good backing plate that you can put in there that really holds it all together. So for me, I've always just cut the top of the deck out, filled that area with solid fiberglass, and then sand it, uh, fair it, paint it, all the standard things you would do when you do a big hole. But making those stanchion bases solid fiberglass instead of core has just drastically helped my boat. It's made my lifelines, they're rock solid. If I hit something, generally whatever I hit's going to give, not the boat. Let's move on from the lifelines. Let's move to the mast. Definitely check all the halyard shivs. Check all the cleats, like the spinnaker halyard cleats. Make sure they're in good shape. If they've got this little slug that slides down that holds the cleat on, go ahead and pull that slug out, because if you don't pull it out after a while, it corrodes, and you'll see when you do pull it out, you'll start seeing a lot of pitting, and it's going to look like it's falling apart. You can either get like a fiberglass slug to stick in there, or you can get a plug from a similar thing from what is it, West Marine or whatever hardware stores near you, and you can stick things in there, retap it, and reset it. That's a big thing because you don't want your cleats to come ripping off the mast. Um, Other than that, put backing plates under your jib tracks. It's rare they pull out, but they do flex and leak a little bit. So I always make a solid fiberglass backing plate, the length of the car, it's about quarter of an inch thick, and you can just glue that under that track, and it beefs it up, and it's not going to move at all. So the less movement it has, the better it is at preventing leaks. And of course, leaks are the cause of of death to a boat. Water gets into the core, starts to rot it out, delaminates it. So, a lot of this is just fighting leaks. Now from there, you want to check your shivs on your main halyard, your jib halyard, and spinnaker halyard. The spinnaker halyard, if it goes bad, you can order one from Melges. You might be able to get one straight from Harkin. Or in a pinch, like say you're at a regatta, the shiv for the outhaul is the same. The shiv inside the spinnaker pole is the same, on the inside of it. The crank for the keel lift, that's the same shiv. So you can pull one out of there and stick it on the top of your mast for your spinnaker halyard. So there's a quick tip in case you break one in a pinch. Definitely have it replaced though, because those bind up all the time, and the worst thing you can do is have a spinnaker that won't come down because the halyard is stuck. Definitely pull out all the pins for your main halyard shiv and your jib halyard shiv and get those lubed up. Doesn't hurt it, plus you can check the wear and tear, and it's always a good thing to do. Check your shrouds. Make sure they're not losing wires or starting to rust real bad. And another thing is spreaders. Now I notice this a lot in the Melges class, especially where you take your spreaders on and off a lot. What I do is I just get a little bit of resin and coat on the inside, the inside of the spreader where it goes over the spreader bar. That seems to help a lot to keep the wiggle down. It does make it difficult to get on and off, but that's kind of the point. You don't want any movement up there. So putting a little resin in that inside of that spreader and sliding it on the bar, that helps. If you want to, you could always just recoat the spreader bar. That can solve the same problem. Might be a little easier to do as well. At least it'll definitely be easier to sand than reaching inside the spreader. So put a little resin on that and see if that helps tighten up that little joint up there. One of the next things I see with the mast is just about every mast I've seen has kind of like the build bin to it, where you set the mast up and you have no load on your lowers. You've measured your uppers, and the mast has a little curve, from top to bottom. And of course, you're sitting there thinking, "Oh, do I need to tighten up more on one lower than the other?" Well, what that is, a lot of times, it's part of the manufacturing process. But what you can do to fix that is you can put a really expensive set of taps underneath your mast base and screw it up one side to balance it out. Or you can use my method, which is basically 35 cents. You get a quarter and a dime, and you stick it on one side of the base of the mast, and believe it or not, it raises that side just enough to kick that mast back in column when it's in resting state. That's something that's real easy to do. You've almost always got 35 cents or a pocket full of change laying around, so throw it in there every couple of regattas, change it out. You kind of have to because it wiggles out or falls out. So, but there's an easy way to get your mast in column while the boat is resting. All right, so let's move on to the boom. Take it apart, check your outhaul. Those things get twisted up and tangled up, and the lines break, and you don't really know it, or you know it, but you aren't aware that the failure's coming until it's too late. So go ahead and take that end cap off, check the line, check the cable that's in there. Just do a double check on that at least once every year or two. It's always a good preventative maintenance thing. It's definitely worth it. All right, so let's move to your jib sheet cleats and your turning blocks. Those cleats don't really sit at the best angle, so they're not really perfectly flat. So they do leak a good bit. Now, once again, like I did with my stanchions, it's good to go ahead and drill out that area, make it a nice big hole, tape up the bottom, fill that sucker with solid glass. That way, when you do put a bolt back in there and the water leaks, it's not going to ruin the core of your boat. So that's a good tip. Um, I do that pretty much with all of my stanchion or my turning blocks because there's a lot of pressure and a lot of side load and strange loads that pull on it. Once again, you got to keep water out of the core. So I basically have done that with everything that goes through the deck on my boat just to make sure I don't have any core damage, any problems. Um, Now that also might make your boat heavier. So check your weight, check your numbers, make sure you're not on the cusp. But once you do that, your boat's going to be solid. Um, Nothing's going to rip out. You don't have any problems. It's a good thing. Uh, your travelers rarely do rip out, but there is a lot of load on them, and I have seen them move and wiggle a little bit. So if you have an extra traveler or spare parts, kind of like I do, stick a big backing plate under there. I stuck an exact copy replica from one of my other boats directly under there. So I have two traveler bars, one on top, one underneath. If my traveler rips out, it's taking the whole deck. Um, Same thing with the main sheet. I cut a big section out there, filled it with solid glass, made a big backing plate underneath it. It's not going anywhere. Um, the one area I didn't really do a lot of that to was these two stern pulpits. I didn't really do much of those. I don't mind if they wiggle a little bit. I keep them pretty well bedded, and they don't seem to wiggle much, but that's one area I just need to get to. But if you're going ahead and cutting these areas out, you may as well do those too. Um, Check your gudgeons. They are very rarely in line and straight up and down. If you have a laser level or a level or like a laser sight, uh, get your boat up on some stands or lift it up real high and balance it out the best you can. Get you a big level to set across the stern so you can see or make sure the boat's level. Then you can see if your keel's in line with your rudder. And my keel was fine. My rudder was way off. Now I've checked like 3 or 4 other boats and their rudder is off as well. Go ahead and do that. Um, get that thing leveled or centered in line with the rest of the boat. Another thing you're going to want to check on is those bolt holes for the gudgeons that are on the boat. Those things wallow loose all the time. I've noticed over about 2 years, two seasons of sailing, they move. They actually make the hole about 1/8 of an inch larger. Now it doesn't seem to crack the seal on the back, or at least I haven't noticed it. But every time I pull it off, the holes are a lot bigger than they were when I stuck them on there. So check that out. Put a big backing plate on there. Um, Once again, let's go up to the Delrins. This is on the keel area. Get new Delrins at least every 2 years. They seem to definitely help protect your keel. You won't get all those scratches in it. So that's a good preventative maintenance thing. Plus, if you wait too long, they just wear out. Your keel starts wobbling. That's not fast. It's not a good thing. Um, Also, go ahead and get yourself some keel protectors. If you need them, give me a call or shoot me a message. I'll make them. Mine are a little larger and a little beefier than the others that you see on the market. They really keep the keel from moving, even when it's trailering or when it's just sitting still. But I put them in as soon as my keel starts coming up and take them out right when my keel's going down. I haven't had to rebuild the trailing edge of my keel in years. So definitely worthwhile. Uh, Now, I guess there's really not much else to look at other than just check the weight of your boat. If you can get access to a good scale, use that to keep an eye on your weight. Make sure it's staying in the class rules and the class numbers that you had your boat measured at. Because if the weight starts going up, then you're soaking in water somewhere. Another thing to do is check the inside pans of your boat. Where like the forward V berth, that's part of the structure that helps hold the boat apart. Same with the little seats and the little dummy seats in the back that nobody can fit into. Um, my boat is really old; it's number 9, so I've got a strange floor pan in mine. Now I've noticed my pan and my seats and even my forward V berth deck have all started cracking apart. So I went through with some thickened epoxy with a heavy duty large caulk gun style injector and refilled all those cracks. That helps secure everything, and that's definitely beefed up my boat and feels a lot more solid now. While you're down there, check your compression post. That compression post has generally problems holding itself up. There's a bulkhead underneath there that sometimes gives out, so give that a good inspection. Make sure your compression post is in column. I'm not going to say Melges doesn't do a good job of keeping them in column, but every now and then, they're not. So keep a good eye on that, because if that compression post is out of whack, what that does is it allows the rig to push down one side or the other a little differently, and it can help pull your chain plates out, or not your chain, I guess chain plates, those old bulkheads that the chain plates are attached to. They start delaminating from the hull. So make sure your compression post is straight and biting well down on the bottom bulkhead. I find that very important. Most of the failures and delaminations and problems I've seen with bulkheads failing or starting to or getting soft is because of that. While you're down there, take your chain plates off, just a couple bolts, I think it's 4 bolts. Take them off, check those holes, because those holes go through, glass and then foam and then glass. Mine was beginning to elongate pretty well, so I had to refill mine, re-drill them, and restuck them. Since then, I've had no problems, and also make sure they don't leak. So once again, make sure nothing leaks. And like I did down with all my other things that go through the deck, I ground out the core, filled it with glass. Now you don't have to get crazy and make the whole thing a big glass area. I'm talking just, a couple inches around whatever you screw into or whatever goes through the deck. Just make sure it's solid so that water doesn't go through and mess it up. Now with the stanchions, I did get a little bigger probably than I should have, mainly help spread the load, but everything else doesn't have to be very large, just the size of your object. That really seems to help cut down on the leaking and strengthens everything up. Now with that, let's move to the rudder. The tiller seems to be a future failure point to me, and it could just be because I have such an old boat that mine has failed. The little arms on the back of the tiller where it is shaped like a U, that part has failed on me. It's cracked out on 2 of the tillers I've had, and once again, they're older tillers, and I could just be yanking on the stick too hard, but they keep cracking, and I've found that it's partially foam, partially filler in that back area. It's not really giving it much strength. So I know I've had to grind mine out and put a bunch of carbon in there just to beef it up and spread the load and give it strength. So keep an eye on those. And then once again, look at your pentles that are on the rudder. Make sure that they're not rusting out. And if your bolts are rusting, some of that's the fact that stainless and carbon don't get along, and it creates rust and creates corrosion. So take a look at your bolts, because if they're starting to rust, they're corroding, they're starting to fail. Take a look at it, double check it, beef it up. Use silicone on that area as well, just because I've found through breaking a rudder at one time that those rudders, even though they're pretty much solid carbon, in the head there is a little bit of a core. Now mine, on my last rudder, it had developed a vertical crack, and then it eventually broke. Well, of course, I cut into it to figure out what was going on and why it did break, and I found out that it has a little bit of a core. Now my core was basically thickened resin, and it only was probably 1/4 of an inch thick, and I'd say 1.5 feet long from the head leading into the skinny part of the rudder. But either way, it's cored. Something got in there, water got in there, made it delaminate. Bye-bye rudder. And let me tell you, they are not cheap or easy to find. So take care of it while you can. And I think that basically covers all the boat parts, other than sails. If you need sails, give me a call. I'll help you get new ones and take care of you with that. Oh, I did forget a very important thing to look at. Your head stay tang. Now, it is also where your bow eye goes into the front of your boat, where you hook your trailer or your bow line, things like that. That bow eye goes into a basically a stainless. I guess it's kind of shaped like a seven. Um, that's basically your head stay tang that holds everything down. Mine ripped out a couple of years ago, and it was a pretty much as a big disaster. So check it out. Make sure that U-shaped U-bolt doesn't break, and just check out the overall quality of that tang, because if it does fail, you're going to be lucky to keep your rig in the boat, and it's probably going to break that little plate that covers the roller furler on the inside of your bow. Uh, just take a look. It's worthwhile taking a look at it and ordering a new one, because they don't last forever. It's pretty skinny stainless steel. It's engineered well, but it's pretty skinny. So take a look at that while you're at it. And with that, I think that covers all the boat parts. You know who to call for sales, and I think that's it for this edition of Sailing Views. Like I say, I know this is primarily for Melges 24s, but you can use this information on other boats. I've rebuilt tons of boats and have to do a lot of deck recoring. In fact, I've got a J22. I'm recoring the deck around the chain plates right now. I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to put a foam deck in that little area, and I'm going to make the area right around the chain plates where it goes through the deck. It'll be solid glass. Why? It keeps water out of the core. So, like I said, great tips. I hope you can use them. The 35-cent one, don't forget to give me credit for it, because 35 cents can keep your rig in column. Other than that, this is Zane with Sailing Views. Over, out, and bye-bye.